Hi, I'm Michael Smith, and I just want to thank everyone at the Weekly Dartscast, all the listeners and all the followers who voted me your player of the year. Thank you so much. It means a lot. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Weekly Dartscast, sponsored by Dartwolf. I'm Alex Moss, and alongside me, my co-host, the darts statistician, the darts driver king, Burton DeWitt. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing okay here, thank you. A busy weekend of darts to look back on, another busy weekend of darts coming up to look ahead to, and we'll be joined by two guests on the show this week. We'll be taking a deep dive into all things ADC with their head of global operations, Scott Hunt. We'll also be joined by another of the new PDC tour card holders for 2023. Adam Warner calls in. But just before then, let's get into the top end of the PDC. And the early year World Series events continued in Denmark at the weekend, and Peter Wright back in the winner's circle, beating the world numbers 3, 4 and 1 on Saturday to win the Nordic Darts Masters. How significant could this title be for him?
Well, I think more than anything, it shows that what I've said the last couple weeks may be right, and that's that there was nothing to worry about with Peter Wright. And I understand why people were worrying. He didn't win a title last year on television after the World Championships. He barely had a deep run at any major all year, and it wasn't like he was lighting up the floor of the Euro Tour either. So there were reasons to wonder what the state of his game was. I think they were legitimate questions, but I was never really worried. Early in the year, I think there was some of the fear of getting to world number one, the one real major thing he hadn't yet accomplished. Yes, there's a few majors that he's never won. He's never won the Grand Slam. He's never won the Grand Prix. There are majors that are still left to check off the CV, but the big thing that hadn't been checked off was world number one. Crossing that line and becoming world number one early in the year did seem to be a step that was still getting to him. He didn't, he fell apart against Gerwyn Price in that final when it was winner take all early in the year. And eventually he did get to number one after the UK Open. And for the next few months, he and Gerwyn Price went back and forth. And he never really reclaimed it for a long term because he didn't have success on television. But I don't think it was because he was necessarily losing motivation or playing poorly or anything. I think it was just he was biding his time for the World Championships. Like I've said the last few months, really. And when his wife had her health issues around the Grand Slam and then Players Championship, it ruined his preparation for the World Championships. He was getting ready to be at his best for the World Championships, and he lost a month of match preparedness because of that. And we saw that he was ready when he played this past week, beating the world number 3, beating the world number 4, beating the world number 1, like you said in the intro to the question, but also how he did it, how dominant he looked at times, averaging nearly 105 for most of that final, averaging well over the ton for most, well, not in the first round. He did not look great in the first round, but other than that, looked really good the entire weekend. And that's because he was at the peak of his game, or at least had time to get there. He ended up getting there a month later because of losing that time in the preparation, but he still was able to get there. Now the question is, how long is he going to maintain this, and how is he going to pace himself for the rest of the year? He has shown to everyone what he, I'm sure, always knew, which was that he was still one of the best players in the world, and he's still a player who can beat everyone, because he did beat everyone. He beat MVG, Michael Smith, and Gerwyn Price. But he's still a player who can beat anyone and everyone and lift a title. He knew that. Now we know that as well. But the question is, how is he going to pace himself? Because his goal is, sure, he would like to check off those events that I've mentioned that he hasn't won, but his goal is to win a third world title. He's 11 months away from that right now. So how is he going to pace himself this year? Is he going to set himself on that same track that he did last year and that he did the year before and he did when he won the title the first time, to make sure that he's at his best come November and December? Or is he going to try to ride this for a little bit of time? There is something to be said about him riding this for a little bit of time. He still has never won the Premier League, and he's playing really well as the Premier League campaign is about to get underway. We're assuming he's going to be in the Premier League. And by the time you're listening to this, they might have already announced that. But so there are things early in the year that maybe he'll want to keep this level of performance up for a bit. But the goal for him is to win a third world title. And that means, I think for him, this is just icing, proving to everyone else what he was trying to do last year and that he can still do that. And I think we'll maybe see a little bit of a regression as we get into the year, but at the back end of the year, we'll see Peter Wright try to do what he tried to do last year, what he did do the year before, what he did do when he won that first world title, and that's peak at the right time. I think that this doesn't really change anything. I think this title is significant because it shows that what he is doing is the correct thing to do to maximize his skills. But beyond that, it's just another title. And the goal is at the back end of the year, which is, well, as I said, 11 months away.
I put the tweet out half jokingly on Saturday night, times that people have written off Peter Wright, 39,000, and times that Peter Wright has bounced back and proven people wrong, the exact same number. And it's obviously not been that many times, probably more in fact. But coming into 2023, there were question marks around Peter Wright. His 2022 season was nowhere near as successful as his 2021 season. And as you touched on there were reasons off the hockey behind that. He took some time off in the summer. He had surgery to have his gallbladder removed. His wife Jo has been in and out of hospital during the last few months of the year, and we even saw that have an effect in the majors, where Peter Wright was defending the Players' Championship finals and withdrew from that event to spend time at home with Jo, and darts, quite rightly so. It wasn't a priority at that time, but you look back at his season, pocketed just under 250 grand in ranking money. Compare that to the season before, almost £900,000, and that includes his second world title, and before that the World Match Play, the Players' Championship finals. You've got the two biggest ranking titles in the PDC, another of them in Minehead, so 3 of the 7 TV ranking events that he won that year. So it was a special year for Peter Wright, but when you don't back it up the following year, it does mean you go into that third year, if you like, defending that prize money with some pressure on your shoulders. And we've not really started this season properly yet. We've not had any ranking events yet, but provisionally, Peter Wright, you look at the end of the year after this next World Championship, down at number 10 if you take off all the money that he won 2 years ago. And Peter Wright, he knows that himself. He said it at the weekend. He commented in one of his interviews, if I can still be in the top 10 at the end of this year, then that's a bonus. And that's the current world number 2 saying that. And the win at the weekend in Denmark, yes, it was a World Series event, didn't carry any ranking points as such, but these events, they still take some winning. And as we touched on at the start, he's beaten the other 3 players in the top 4 in the world in back-to-back games on the same day, and over a long format like it was the best of 19, best of 21, and played pretty well in all them games. And after the first round, coming through that decider against Dennis Nilsson on the Friday, he showed some good stuff on that Saturday. I think it was 22 140s against Michael van Gerwen, and the finishing is what really stood out in the other 2 games. The 50% against Michael Smith and then 55% against Gerwin Price, 102 average in the end in that final. So it's an important year coming up for Peter Wright. He'll be well aware of that, as he's already touched on. And I think the win, it is significant. It will give him some confidence heading into the new season, and to have beaten those 3 players as well. But he'll also know in the back of his head that there's a lot of work that he's going to need to do over these next 12 months if he is to preserve that place that he's got at the top end of the rankings, the top 2, top 3, top 4, top 5.
Now, looking ahead, this upcoming weekend will be the Masters as the PDC Roadshow rolls back into Milton Keynes. The last 2 years, we've seen an outsider come through the pack to win their first singles title on TV. Johnny Clayton, who had, of course, won the World Cup with Gerwin Price the year before, won the 2021 Masters, and Joe Cullen won in 2022, and both of them went on and did a lot more after that. Clayton, of course, winning 4 majors, including the Premier League. Joe Cullen missing a dart to win the Premier League later that year. Who do you think is best placed to follow in their footsteps this time around?
Yeah, I thought this was an interesting topic to discuss on the show, because we won't go too in depth on the Premier League this week, but at the time of recording, we don't have that lineup a little over a week now before the opening night in Belfast. But the last 2 years, we have seen that Premier League carrot dangled in front of the players at the Masters, and the 2 players that you mentioned there that have grasped that opportunity with both hands. Johnny Clayton, 2021, first of all, making the most of the Masters, being extended from 16 players to 24 for the first time that year. That got him in the field and doesn't get talked about enough, I don't think, but winning through 4 last leg deciders to beat Jose de Souza, Michael van Gerwen, James Wade, Peter Wright to make the final, and then getting past Mervyn King to win the Masters and get in the Premier League. And then 12 months ago, Joe Cullen's impressive run to the title, and the standout result from that in 2022, beating Gary Anderson 10-1 with a 106 average, then going on to beat Dave Chisnall in the final. So the last 2 years, we've had finals where both players were bidding for their first singles major title in the PDC. It could happen this year. We've got, I think 6 players in the top half, 4 in the bottom half, so 10 players out of the 24 looking for their first singles major in the PDC. And from those 4 in the bottom half, the last time we saw Gabriel Clemens, he made the World Championship semi-finals. He's got Jose de Sousa up first. Then if he gets through that, it's Michael van Gogh over the best of 19. You've also got 2 players going up against each other, Ryan Searle and Dave Chisnell, and then Callum Reed's one of the debutants in the Masters this year against James Wade. But I'm going to go for someone from the top half for my picks, and I can't decide between 2 at the moment, and that is Stephen Bunting and Luke Humphries. Stephen Bunting at the World Championships again, I know it was a few weeks ago now, but got to the quarterfinals, and if he can bring some of the darts that he threw at Ali Pali to this weekend, I think he's got a real shot of having a deep run at the Masters. And he's got a tough draw. Nathan Aspinall in the first round, those 2 were practicing together in the lead up to Ali Pali, so I'm not sure if they've been practicing together recently after we've had this draw confirmed for the Masters. But you think last year about Nathan Aspinall as well, pulled out of the Masters because of his injury, and then since come back and made 2 major finals. And he's going to be someone that's in the conversation for the Premier League. That will probably be on his mind going into this weekend. And Stephen Bunting, on the other hand, probably going to have to do what Johnny Clayton or Joe Cullen did and win the Masters to have a chance of getting back in the Premier League. And the other player, Luke Humphries, out of the 10 players, he's got the advantage of being a seed for this tournament. He's up to number 5 in the world, and like Nathan Aspinall, he is being touted for that Premier League, and we've just seen him play in the 2 World Series events in Bahrain and Denmark the last 2 weeks. So he'll play either the defending champion Joe Cullen or Chris Dobie in his first game. But top 24 in the world, there's not many easy draws in there, is there? But I'll go with Stephen Bunting, Luke Humphries. They're going to be my 2 tips to maybe follow in the footsteps of Clayton in 21 and Cullen in 22 this weekend.
You mentioned some of the players I was going to mention. I was actually going to start with Bunting as well. And I mentioned I think right before the World Championships last year, that Bunting had been threatening something all year. He had been playing really well in the Players' Championships. Last year, he finished across the Players' Championships, excluding Darryl Pilgrim, because he only played 1 match. Granted, he averaged nearly 100 in that. But throwing him out because he only played 1 match, Bunting was 15th for averages last year in the Players' Championship event. So that's 9 above what his overall order merit is. He was ahead of Nathan Aspinall. We talked about having a really good year. He was also ahead of Danny Noppert, who won a major, Dimitri Vandenberg, Joe Cullen, Christopher Tyskie, a bunch of these players who are also in this field and also, looking to play into the Premier League. He overall, and averages aren't everything, but he did play at a higher standard or a slightly higher standard across the 30 Players' Championship events than they did. The other end was that he really was struggling on television. He was not playing his best events in the major tournaments and up until the World Championships, when he went on a good run yet again, and was able to do just enough to defend and stay in the top 24, because, of course, he had that semifinal run that he was defending from a couple years ago, and he was threatening to drop quite a bit had he not gone on a good run. But he hadn't done it on television. He had it on floor, and I really think he has been threatening. Well, we can't call it a breakthrough because he's been in the Premier League before after his first year in the PDC. But since then, he hasn't really had that televised breakthrough. He had that semifinal run at the World Championships just over 2 years ago now, which was big. But beyond that, really hasn't had that follow-up performance to his first year. But I think he's playing at the level where he's threatening it, and he has an opportunity. Nathan Aspinall, who he was just ahead of in the averages last year, is his first round opponent. Danny Noppert, who hasn't fully kicked on from since winning the UK Open, is his potential second round. That could get him into the quarterfinals. When I was going to say Michael Smith would wait, but it could be Damon Hedda, it could be Ross Smith, and I'm going to get to Hedda in a second. But it's an opportunity for Stephen Bunting, and I think if he can continue with that World Championship form, if he can continue with his Pro Tour form, which was fantastic, that breakthrough is around the corner. Stephen Bunting is on the precipice of reestablishing himself at the top of the PDC darts. This is a huge opportunity for him. But Damon Head is another one. It looked like that breakthrough in television was coming. He kind of dropped off at the back end of the year. He went from looking at one point like he was one of the top 4 players in the world, and I think at one point he was up to, I think, 3rd or 4th in the Darts Oracle Power Rankings at one point in the middle of the year because of the level he was playing out on the Euro Tour and what he was doing even on television, even though it didn't lead to a title. Damon Hedda has been on the cusp, but he has given a tough draw. Ross Smith, of course, we talked about last week. We've talked about a bunch since winning the European Championships. He looks the real deal now. And that that could have been his nickname if it wasn't taken. I know a lot of people suggested that when he was going through his potential new nicknames, but of course the real deal already exists, so Ross Smith couldn't take that. But he does look the real deal recently. And then obviously Michael Smith is another potential second round that stands in the way of Damon Hedda, making that a deep run here. But he can beat them. If he gets back to playing like he did in the first half of the year, he is live to win this title. And I do think he has a television title in him, not just obviously the World Cup, but a singles television title. And that maybe makes him the spiritual successor to Johnny Clayton, because as we mentioned, Johnny Clayton won the Masters for his first singles title right after having won the World Cup the year before. Damon Hedda has that chance to follow in his footsteps. And I'll mention just one more player as a potential breakthrough, and that's Dirk van Dijvenbode. Came within a leg of winning a title last year in the World Series finals. He's been to the Grand Prix final. He's, other than Luke Humphries, probably the most accomplished player now in recent years not to have a major title. Obviously, Dave Chisnell with all those major finals, Mervyn King in the PDC have accomplished more over the course of their careers. But in recent years, Dirk van Dijvenbode has probably accomplished the most on the televised stage of someone who hasn't yet broken through and won a major. So maybe he's the one who's next in line, along with Luke Humphries. He's playing well enough, and this could be his moment. If it's not, I do think he wins a major this year. Put that down for my tip of the year, even though we'll get to that later, even though I'll probably lose out on that in the end.
Yeah, we're definitely going to come back to that, and we'll be back in a moment with some more chat. But let's get to our first guest on this week's show. And we're going to steer away from the PDC now. We're going to chat with the head of global operations at the ADC. Here's our chat with Scott Hunt. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the ADC's head of global operations, Scott Hunt. Thanks for the time, Scott. How you doing?
Hi, Alex. Yep, I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having us back on. A lot's changed in the last year. So, let's go ahead.
Good man. Yeah, lots to catch up on since we last spoke to you on the show in April of last year. Starting, though, away from the ADC and your own darts, you said that the annual Hunt Christmas Pairs at the end of 2021 was postponed. Your dad, unfortunately, wasn't very well, but the event would return the following year. So did it make a comeback last month, and who won?
It did. As always, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Adam wanted, I literally walked through the door and Adam wanted to start straight away, but I had to have a couple of drinks to ease me nerves, so we started an hour later. But unfortunately, myself and my other brother David were lost out again. My dad, he the deciding leg, he threw a big 1-3-3 to leave Adam on a double, and Adam took out. So, yeah, we've got beat again, and they're the reigning champions.
Fair play. Well, keep the practice going. I'm sure you're getting back at Christmas this year.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, as people know, your brother is Adam Hunt. Unfortunately, missed out on getting his tour card back at Q School last week. He's in Milton Keynes at the moment for the Challenge Tour this weekend. How is he feeling about what the rest of this year has in store for him now?
Yeah, so obviously he was very deflated, but he knows he personally didn't put enough work in back for the full year. So this year it's kind of more of a blessing as such. He's just moved into a new house, got his dartboard back up, practicing well. So he sees this as a bit of a blessing. He's going to, get back to his roots, start winning games again, enjoying the game, doing something a little bit different. He's just accepted his invite to the Modus Super Series, so he'll be appearing on there as well soon. So all in all, yeah, looking forward to a good year.
Well, let's get on to your work then with the ADC, and rewinding back to our last chat, it was just before the first weekend of the new championship tour, and when it came round, I think a lot of darts fans were impressed by the whole setup for the events. Very much mirrored a pro tour event. Just starting with the setup and how the events ran, was it everything that you'd hoped for?
Yeah, definitely. That we aimed for that from the beginning. Obviously, myself and Steve's played on the tour a lot of years. I've visited and been a lot of the floor events, and I'm friends with both tournament directors that run these events. So I've learned a lot from them, as well as it's passed on from my own events that I started 7 years ago. And just to give that experience to the amateur player, it's paramount to what we want to do. It gains confidence, playing in that setting behind the barriers, no alcohol behind the barriers, tablet score, and everything runs smooth and everything relays back to us at the control desk, and it was just keeping the flow throughout the day. And we've had great feedback. We've got events planned again this year. We're actually extending it. We're doing another weekend. So yeah, all in all, really good feedback, and glad we can offer that to everyone of any ability. You know, if you've got the money, you can just come down. It's now £12.50 per event, and we're going to have 4 events a weekend this year, so plenty of darts for everyone.
No, it looked very good, and it culminated with the finals in October. They've been rebranded as the Open Series for 2023. You just mentioned there you've got another weekend added on for this year. So talk us through the changes that tour's going to go through this year.
Yeah, so the idea behind it was to give everyone the opportunity to play. So we got some feedback from a lot of players that played on the tour last year, and a lot of them to the back end either didn't attend because they didn't think they could make finals, or they didn't attend because they thought they were already safe. So we're obviously linking up with Modus Super Series. We can now offer all 16 event winners the chance to play on the Modus Super Series, gain, TV exposure, take them on to the next level, and eventually play for that. They can have the chance to play for £20,000 first prize. So, yeah, the idea was behind, we're going to dot around, obviously, different areas around the UK. As I said, just give everyone the opportunity to play any event they wish to. They can travel to as many or as little as they want, depending on funds and availability. And yeah, that was the idea behind it, really.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that Modus Super Series link up that you've got there. There's quite a few announcements at the back end of last year, and that was one that stuck out in particular. I mean, during 2023, there's going to be 50 qualifiers coming from the ADC to take part in it. You mentioned there 16 of them are going to come from the Open Series event winners, but how are the other spots going to be handed out?
So we've kind of all different tiers. We're looking at national level to the top end, which is through the Open events. The Open Series events. We've introduced a new concept called the Vault, which is regular competitive dart at your local bar. We're now just nearing towards 40 weekly events around the UK. We've started in Scotland. The conversations we had last year, we were looking to break into Scotland and to Wales. We now have 3 weekly events in Wales and 2 in Scotland. We've had some good feedback for that, and hopefully as time goes we'll grow and add more events in those areas. So these Vault round robin events, you play on a weekly basis and you accumulate points from better place finishers over the 12-month cycle, which is a series. The top 32 players that are in that order of merit for each region will play off for a Modus Super Series spot. So you don't have to travel. You can just attend your local bar. You can get some points and then take the next step to go on to these opportunities. We're also offering spots via your regional table, which comes from the Open rankings, so your weekend competitions as such. You can travel anywhere around the UK. So, for example, myself in the northeast, I could travel down to London for an event, and those points would attach back to my regional table. And the top 32 in the regional tables at the cut-off will again play off the Modus Super Series spot. So there's loads of different avenues. If you want to play weekend competitions, you still get the chance. If you want to play weekday dart at your local bar, you still get your chance. And if you want to travel, play a bit more professional setup, get our tour events, you get to do that as well.
Well, looking back on last year, I guess the one big disappointment was that the World Open that was due to be held in December before it was cancelled. The concept, it looked quite interesting. A lot of qualifiers coming from around the world. Will we see the World Open rescheduled sometime in the future, or are you looking at other ideas at the moment?
Yeah, so we're literally going back to basics as such. We are building from the ground up. We might have been a little bit naive, trying to think we could do that in our third year. Possibly, yes, but we understood that. We looked at different factors. And we thought, look, let's go back to basics, offer it from ground level up, your local bar, start from the beginning and build up. Building a better network now. We've just surpassed 2,000 members in the first 6 weeks of the renewal. So we're in good form at the moment. We're looking to build up the networks in Australia and New Zealand. As we're speaking now, there's currently a competition in Perth, which is the Winmore Series. Got some good players over there that whoever the top 3 players will be coming over and playing in the Modus Super Series. We will be starting in Europe as well. We've got Vincent van der Voort heading up that section with Michael van Gerwen. Both of them will be a massive support in that area. But as I mentioned, start from the beginning again, take our time and build up from the bottom.
And I remember when we last spoke, you said that the main goal for 2022 was to win people over, that the focus on technology at events, it was going to be a slow burner to get more people on board. But as you say there, you're getting more people on board every week. And I guess for our listeners who might be a player, or there's someone that organises tournaments that's maybe undecided, what would you say to them? What are the costs involved in joining the ADC, and what are the main benefits on coming on board?
The main benefits is purely to help these organisers. It obviously benefits ourselves and it benefits the players, but but it reduces massive admin time. So me personally, from my experiences, I put it up now and I use Darts Atlas and the software partner that we use. I can take pre-registrations, I can take payments online. So, and I'm reaching such a big wide market now because it's so accessible to search online on Darts Atlas. You can put your town or postcode in and you can find up all these competitions that are near to you. And just the player experience on the day, it's massively enhanced. So tablet scoring, as everyone knows, is just a lot smoother for both the players and the marker. And just the visual spectator side of it, the engagement, you can follow your friends and family live from your phone. So we've linked up with a lot of promoters around the country, and one I will highlight that's massively taken it on board is Lewis Tuck in the Somerset area. He uses large TV screens. He links up and he has all the tables live, all the games coming through, the order of play. It's all visual, and these players are really enjoying it. And I think that's the main thing, is it's linking and helping players and competitions and competition organisers find players. And we're just, growing the game one step at a time.
Well, recently we've also seen the number of ADC regions been cut back from 16 to 9, so each region is going to now incorporate a larger area. What was the thinking behind making that change?
Yeah, so we were strong in certain areas. Undoubtedly, the northeast, northwest, and southwest, these are the strongest areas, and we felt that just broadening those kind of the boundaries as such would entice more people to travel and create a little bit more competition in these areas, which is proven already. The whole of Wales and the whole of Scotland are now one table. And prime example, bonus to our Broth, we have 2 round robins running. One on a Wednesday, one on a Sunday. People are actually making that travel, which is an hour and a half every Sunday now and every Wednesday. So it's proven that it's worked, and there's going to be a little bit more competition in these areas, and ultimately we'll get stronger and there'll be more members off the back of that.
Excellent. Well, the link up, as you mentioned, with Modus, you've also got the Undisputed Series going on. The belt's still an important part of the ADC. How is that side of it going to work this year?
We're going to plan events at Modus Super Series itself. We've linked up with Modus to offer a stage experience with all these belt matches, and it will be live streamed back to YouTube. I'm actually popping down to Portsmouth with Steve in a week or two to meet George, and we're going to talk over our plans and the dates for what we want to do for this year. But one of there'll be 2 or 3 belts on the line coming up soon in the next couple of months. Southwest, Northeast, and the Northwest belts will be up for grabs. But ultimately, these players can get real-time stage experience in front of the cameras, broadcasters live back to YouTube on a great set of what Modus have created. And again, it's just anyone can bid for it. If you want, you want to take on your local regional champion, play live on YouTube on that stage, you can do, and it's the start of £500 for each bid. And if you want to get in, touch with us on uk.dartcircuit.com, we'll look into it.
Well, last year we saw a little bit of a rivalry develop with Kevin Painter and James Richardson for the European title, but as far as the global title, which is the highest one, Jared Cole probably running out of polish for his belt. How close are we to seeing him defend that title?
Yeah, so Jared's actually been in touch with us not long ago, just wondering if there's anyone want to put a bid in. We've had a couple of some interest in it, but nothing concrete. The bids do start at £2,000 to challenge Jared for that belt. But as we know, we're going to start small again. We're going to build everything up, and we'll maybe look at qualifiers, running regional qualifiers, raise some money that way. And then someone could use that money raised to take on Jared. We've got loads of different avenues to go, but we're not rushed to do anything quickly. When the time's on our side here, we're doing well, we're moving at a good pace. So eventually, when the time is right, these big matches will happen.
Speaking of moving forward, another announcement in relation to the ADC's involvement in the women's game. You've got Claire Stamper on board, the head of women's development. You've got a women's championship tour launching this year as well. Just give us an update on how the women's side of the ADC is looking to push on.
Yeah, so we brought Claire on. I know Claire well from the North East scene, and Claire's been involved in darts for a number of years in loads of different aspects. But no, it's just been forefront of pushing the ladies' game, and I think that was brought through COVID, where she ran multiple online ladies' leagues and kept, really made a big scene and had everything streamed and linked up all these ladies that have never met each other before, and they all played online, and now a lot of them have become good friends. Claire was massive to driving forward what we need to do, and she's working on introducing some singles leagues across the country. We've had some really good interest. We're going to be kicking these off in the next few weeks. So they will be 8-player leagues. Format will be best of 6, first of 4, draw 3-3. And after the 7 weeks, the top 2 performing ladies will then compete in October in the national finals for a £4,000 prize fund and £1,000 to the winner. As well as the tour, we have copied what we done last year with the men's tour. It's going to be the championship, the ladies tour this year. And the top 8 performing ladies after the full year will play live on the Modus Super Series stage and compete for £1,000 for the £1,000 prize money, first prize.
Touched on it as well about the ADC. It's not just in the UK, you're branching out in Australia, New Zealand, Europe as well. For you then, looking into 2023 now, what do you think are going to be the big developments outside of the UK for you guys?
Yeah, so we, as just mentioned at the start of this call, that we are in Perth this weekend with one of the tour events. The guys over there, got the massive respect for the players, and vice versa. The players have got massive respect for our organisers. They're doing great things, and they've got the best talent over there that are competing at these events. So their plans are just to keep going with the tour. After this one finishes, the top 3 will come over here and play on Modus, and they will carry on doing it again. Same with Europe. We're looking at maybe putting on a European Open of some such. We're in early developments with that and early talks. But as we've learned in the past, we'll do things when things are right and time's right. But we've had conversations with other people from around the world, as far as Eastern Europe and stuff like that. So we've got plans, but as of 2023, we'll probably just be looking at Europe, Oceania, and the UK. And then as we move into 2024, potentially start to branch out elsewhere.
Excellent. And lastly, before we let you go, we are only 3 weeks into the year, but if we were to talk at the end of 2023, where would you like the ADC to be? What are the main goals you're looking to try and achieve this year?
Obviously, increase the membership. That's our main thing. We're 2,000 members already. It'll be great to be nearer the 5,000 mark. Branch out into near enough every region. I'm going to these areas that we aren't already operating, and we'll link up with some promoters that would be able to offer these opportunities back to these players. That's the main goal, is cover the UK, conquer the UK first, and just carry on doing what we're doing, offering affordable, competitive, regular darts, loads of different avenues, whether you want to play round robins, opens, play the tour, you can play on Modus Super Series, the full package is there. So just carry on doing what we're doing, and build a membership, and just keep our heads down, and we'll see where we're going.
Good to hear. Well, Scott, always a pleasure to chat. We appreciate you taking the time out, and wish you guys all the best for what's to come this year with the ADC, and we're looking forward to seeing how you get on.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for your time as always, Alex. Take care.
Thanks again to Scott for joining us. And looking back at the weekend, we had the new Challenge Tour season get underway. We had 5 different winners across the 3 days of competition in Milton Keynes. Just run you through the winners from the 5 events. Chris Lamb and Christian Kist, Andy Bolton and Cam Crabtree and Thibaut Tricol were the 5 winners on the Challenge Tour at the weekend. But who caught your eye from the first 5 events of the season?
Well, I'll start by saying I'll actually start by saying 2 people who you didn't mention before I get on to the winners. One will mention, Owen Bates didn't win one, but he was a runner-up in consecutive events, the last event on Saturday and the event on Sunday. And that puts him overall now, other than those 5 winners, as the highest placed player on the order of merit. And he's only within £1,000. If he makes it 3 finals on the spin, he could be topping it after the next event in a couple months' time in Hildesheim. But even though he didn't win any of them, he made 2 finals and was probably the better player in that final on the Saturday against Cam Crabtree. He only averaged over 103 in that match before losing out in the last leg decider. But them's the breaks, as someone once said. In the end, though, it showed, putting together 2 really good runs. He's 3rd overall in the averages so far, behind, a player who I'll come to in a second, and the player who I mentioned for topping the overall Players' Championship averages last year. Granted, that was only through one match, Dale Pilgrim, who's 2nd on the Challenge Tour this year across a much larger sampling. But Owen Bates is 3rd right now, one of only 3 players to top the 91 average, and he's played more matches than anyone else because he made those 2 deep runs. 28 events, nobody else has played more than 25 so far. Obviously, he caught my eye, but I'll mention another player. Okay, he didn't win a title, didn't even make a final, but he cashed in 4 of the events across the weekend. Nobody cashed in all 5. A few people cashed in 4, but he also made a semifinal, a quarterfinal, and 2 last 16s. So 4 really deep runs, averaged 95 across the 25 matches he played. And that is nearly, or actually not nearly, it's more than 3 points more than anyone else did. He was more than 3 points better than anyone. That's the former WDF #1 James Hurl. Really, really impressive. Yes, he didn't win a title. Lost to Thibaut Tricol the last 2 events. Lost to Scott Mitchell in the semifinals of the second event. Mitchell, of course, went on and lost the final to Christian Kiss there. He played just phenomenally across. Well, even the match, the one time he went out early in the last 256, he still averaged nearly 95. Yes, he averaged slightly under. He averaged 0.19 points below his average across the entire weekend, but still averaged nearly 95 and going out on that, averaged over 95 in that tournament. He just played a really, really class level across all 5 events. And even though right now that wasn't enough to get a title, and that only puts him 7th in the order of merit, he was the class player across the weekend. I'll mention just one more person, and that's the American Alex Spellman. I was curious to see how he would do at Q School. I think he could have done a little bit better. I think he could have played better here as well. He's only 40th in the averages, but that's good enough to get in the top 10 overall. And part of that was his deep run. The semifinal he made was by far the worst performance level he played at, but he didn't really need to play that well. He wasn't pushed to a last leg decider at all. Most of his matches were 5-0 or 5-1. So yes, he was averaging 80, 78, 80, 88, 81, and that dragged down his overall average, but he won those 5-0, 5-1, 5-1, 5-1, 5-3. He went up to 91, but won 5-1 again. He wasn't pushed in any of those matches. He didn't need to play any better, and he was just at least at a consistent high 80s level. I think he's a player that the more he plays against the best players in the world, the better he'll be. We hadn't seen as much of him as we had a Danny Lauby, as we had some of the other American players who went over and played Q School. But Alex Spellman may be the best of the lot, and he's still, despite the fact that he wasn't playing at his best, in the top 10 of the order of merit after those 5 events. I think we'll see Alex Spellman get a title this year if he continues to play the Challenge Tour. I think he's a player to look out for.
Yeah, some good picks there, and quite similar to the list that I've got down here as well. And we'll come on to it in our next question as well. But I want to give a mention to the 2 players that won the second events on the Friday and Saturday, starting off with Christian Kist, because as we'll come on to in a moment, these are long days on the Challenge Tour. And Christian Kist, the first event of the season, first game started off at 10:46 in the morning. He went out in the second round at 12:25 in the afternoon. He was back for his first game in the second event at 3:41, won the title at 9:24. So almost an 11-hour day there. And the same on Saturday with Cam Crabtree, his first event of the day, starting at 10 o'clock in the morning, goes out like Christian Kist did in his second game around 12 o'clock, back 4 or 5 hours later to play in the second event of the day and wins the final at around 9:30. So 2 players that have had long days there, not playing darts the whole of those 11 hours, but long breaks between games and able to get over the disappointment of losing early on in the first event, come back and win the second event. And for Christian Kist, of course, he's won a lot bigger titles than this in the past. He is a former Lakeside champion, his second Challenge Tour title. He won one last year, but worthy of a mention more is for Cam Crabtree, because this is his first PDC title, only 19, I believe, and someone that our colleague on the show, Matthew Kiernan, he'll be able to tell us a lot more about him. But he's hit a 9-darter on the Challenge Tour in October last year, played in the first lockdown streams that Matthew was putting on in early 2020, and was averaging 45, which I'm sure a lot of our listeners can relate to. I certainly can, with my 47 average that I got in the second round of the Viking Cup, which I was delighted with. But not like me, he can go on and progress a lot more, because 2.5 years later, look at the level that he's got to now. It's very impressive. We've seen him a little bit on the Modus League as well. He had that monster average, something like 115 in his first game. He signed with Winmore's Team 360, and after the first weekend of the Challenge Tour, sitting 4th on that order of merits, you'd like to think that he'll get a chance to play in some of those first lot of Players' Championship events in a few weeks' time. We'll be unlucky not to make those. And Thibaut Tricol, he's the man that's top after the first weekend. Didn't do a Scott Williams and win 2 events. In fact, the first 2 events he didn't pocket any prize money, but the Frenchman, he came good in the last 2 events of the weekend. a run to the semi-finals of the fourth event, lost out to Owen Bates in the semi-finals, but got revenge the next day, winning that final of event 5 against Owen. And as you mentioned there, Owen Bates definitely worthy of a mention. Getting to back-to-back finals does take some doing. And another player that you mentioned there, James Hurrell, didn't win a title, but as you touched on with the averages, a shade over 95, over 25 games, that's a very good standard, especially in a weekend as long as the Challenge Tour. And we know the quality that James Hurrell's got. You don't get to the top of the WDF rankings if you don't have a bit about you, but the consistency that he showed across those 3 days, I was just having a look, 600 plus averages. There was 8 more games where he averaged between 95 and 99, so you're talking almost 60% of his matches over the weekend, and had a 9-darter in there as well, I think, against Scott Mitchell in a game that he ended up losing. So yeah, he'll be delighted with that, even if he did miss out on a title. And particularly the scoring, I think, of those two players, Owen Bates and James Hurrell, they were top of the 180s, top of the 140s as well. And if they keep that up, they're definitely going to be two to keep an eye on for this year.
And one more question on the Challenge Tour before we move on. It's actually our question of the week. Matthew Edgar tweeted over the weekend, Pro Tours moved to a 1 p.m. start time to give players better preparation time. Meanwhile, the Challenge Tour starts at 10 a.m. with a round of 512 players. Challenge Tour in no way replicates the Pro Tour and needs a major revamp. So our question of the week, though, is if you were in charge, would you make changes? And if so, what would you do?
Yeah, and first of all, I'll avoid making the jokes from the first part of the question. If you're in charge, you can make them yourselves at home. But if our listeners were in charge, 76% of them would make changes based on our poll at the moment. So do go on Twitter and get in touch with us. Let us know your thoughts. I'll just go through some of our listener responses so far. Gareth Hughes has said seedings plus a cap of a 128 based on making their way into round 2 of Q School. That was his suggestion. One of our long-time listeners of the show, John Thompson, said a very good point, that's the entries for last year. He posted up an image of the entries across the first few weekends, and a lot more entries for the first weekend compared to the next few weekends. He said it's a problem that's isolated to the opening weekend when you have a lot of people staying on after Q School and / or just prioritising with the most important events of the year, i.e. getting onto the Pro Tour through them events. Cut the first weekend to 4 events over the same time frame, and it's probably fine. Not sure whether it'd be best to play 1 to 3 on the Friday / Saturday, playing the first 2 or 3 rounds of event 2 on the Friday, then concluding Saturday, or having the Friday to play all 4 down to the last 128. And as he said, last year we had around 260 to 280 in that first weekend, and each weekend after that we do see the numbers drop during the rest of the season. And it was a case of the weekend we had just over 300 players in Milton Keynes. And I think Johnny makes a good point there, because you could perhaps play the first weekend with just the 4 events, cut it back from 5 to 4 and split them a little bit more evenly over those 3 days. I think it would take a bit of tinkering, but I think it is something that is worth looking into, and maybe it is worth the PDC or the PDPA getting feedback from the players themselves if they're not already, because they're the ones that are putting the money in. They pay their entry fees for these events. They are committing to the Challenge Tour, and do they like it as it is, or would they prefer 1 event as opposed to 2 most days and maybe have more prize money in 1 event? I've not played on the Challenge Tour, but they appear to be long days for the players, especially if you have a long run in that second event, because it's the time preparing before the first event in the morning, as you say there, 10:30 start, 10 o'clock start. And then if you do get late into the second tournament, it is a late finish. So you're not going to be able to perform at your best. And sometimes it can be survival of the fittest rather than the best players necessarily coming through. And Matthew Edgar's point there, it's not mirroring the Pro Tour. And I don't think it is it? You've got 2 events a day, but there are rewards on the table here. You've got the 2-year tour cards, you've got the Grand Slam spot, you've got the World Championship spots. There's a lot on the line here for the players. So definitely needs to be looked at, I think. And if you play on the Challenge Tour, if you are listening to this, do let us know your thoughts. We'll read them out on the show. We'll discuss your ideas as well. You can drop us a DM on Twitter or email us weeklydartscast@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts, because it appears that it's something that people are talking about, and maybe there should be a change for the Challenge Tour.
Yeah, I thought about this a bit over the last couple days, and obviously thought about it once we put it on the spreadsheet to discuss. And I understand the criticism, and maybe there is some change that could work. But the other thing is, this is supposed to be an opportunity for players to continue to get in the PDC umbrella matches if they've decided to pay that money and go to Q School. And that does bring in a decent bit of money for the PDC at, £400 per entry for Q School. If nearly 1,000 people are doing it, that is quite a bit of money that's brought in. And if all they get is Q School, not as many people are going to be doing it. There are people who just went and did one day of Q School because they wanted to play the Challenge Tour. And there are players who know they're not ready to have a tour card and wouldn't be doing Q School if they didn't have the Challenge Tour at the back end. And if you make this mimic in some way the Pro Tour, it might drive some people to not go and give it a chance, because how do they know if they're going to make whatever that 128 players in that second tier that would make this mimic it? If it is limited to 128, how do they know they're going to get there? But there could be some type of middle ground that would move us in that direction towards this being a preparatory tour for that next best group of players in the world. And that's, maybe have 3 weekends where anyone who went to Q School is allowed to go. Have 12 events or 15 events across those 3 weekends. But then after that, only allow those who are on the top 128 to continue with the Challenge Tour for the second half of the year and have another 12 events. Maybe those 12 events have a little bit more money on offer, and have those events be run like Players Championship events, so that it really does mimic the obviously at an overall lower level, though James Hurl might disagree with that with the level he played at. But overall, it would probably be a lower level, but still 128 players playing each of those events, 2 or 3 a weekend in that second half of the year, with the carrot of those 2 World Championship spots, spot in the Grand Slam, and spot for those who don't end up with the tour card in the UK Open the following year on the line, and have that be as like a not tour card holders, but these Challenge Tour members who because of their performances in that first half get to play the second half, and that might better prepare them. But that said, the Challenge Tour players have overall, at least the ones who have done well in the Challenge Tour, they've made the transition pretty seamlessly. I mean, Scott Williams last year was playing the Challenge Tour and dominating, well, maybe not dominating, but doing pretty darn well when he was playing the Pro Tour events. He won one of them, and he wasn't the first person ever to do that. The cream of the Challenge Tour seemed to be able to transition smoothly. And yes, this is a different setup. It doesn't seem to be hampering. And the big negative is that they are really, really long days when they don't have to be. But it seems to work, and it does to some extent cut down on costs, because you get 5 events in 3 days. That's 2 fewer days to get those fewer events, and if you had 1 a day, which means that's 2 fewer nights that people have to pay for hotel rooms. Or if you had to split that over 2 weekends, that's possibly 3 fewer days that people have to pay for hotel rooms, and 2 fewer train rides, or 2 fewer car rides, or 2 fewer flights for people coming from overseas, especially for players coming from the Americas to compete in these events, which, if you do it more like Players Championship events, would make it more expensive for events that have a lot less money on the line than Players Championships do. And no one is going to say that there should be 10,000 or 12,000 pounds rather for the winner of these events. Maybe it can go up from 2,000 to 3,000 in the near future, maybe even 4,000. That would be, showing progress on this. But that's a lot to ask people to pay to fly internationally more often than they currently have to. It isn't ideal, but it seems to work the best. Some compromise where there is that second half of the season down to 128 could be good, and it gives some incentive for the players in that first half of the year to make sure they're getting the results, and then they can play a more Players Championship-like atmosphere the second half. That could be a good compromise. But overall, I don't think I would do anything drastic, at least in the first half of the year, because this does work, even if it isn't ideal.
An interesting idea, and one I've not heard of before. Do let us know what your thoughts are on that, and we'll be back in a moment to talk about the results of the Weekly Dartscast Awards. We'll dip into the mailbag as well, but let's get to our next guest on this week's show, and it is courtesy of Matthew Kiernan, the Darting Nerd. Here's our chat with another of the new PDC tour card holders for 2023. Here's our chat with Adam Warner.
Another new tour card holder on the Weekly Dartscast now, and our next guest has made a name for himself on the university darts circuit in Sheffield, the ADC, and of course the Modus Super Series. But perhaps more importantly than all of that is also a loyal listener. Adam Warner joins us now. Adam, congratulations. Has it sunk in yet?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'd say now just about it has, sort of 3-4 days on. Definitely after the first day and second day, I had no idea what had happened, and yeah, it's been a strange few days, we'll put it that way.
Yes, has your phone stopped buzzing yet?
Yeah, just about. It sort of I left it on the Sunday night, and then sort of came back to it on Monday. I was like, oh gosh, that's quite something, that is, just going through it, and it's all lovely, like so many nice words from so many people. So I was very appreciative. But yeah, it was a strange one. But yeah, sort of approaching normality now.
Right, well, we love to hear that, and we'll of course touch more on your achievements from last week in a moment. But we always like to go back to the beginning of where it all started for you. Where did your darts journey begin?
So I can remember being about sort of 8 or 9 years old, and we had a dartboard up on the garden shed at home that me and my dad used to play on. And it was interesting because it was sort of, the hockey was sort of on a slope, but we'd play in all sort of weathers. I remember going in one day back into the house because it was snowing. So like, no, Adam, we can't play there. But yeah, that's where it started. And from then, just sort of playing casually. No competitive stuff really up until I started at university.
Well, that takes us on nicely onto the University of Sheffield and your darts there. Can you give us an idea about the darts scene at university? I missed out on this when I was at uni. There was no dartboard in my student bar. But what was it like at Sheffield?
It was brilliant. I was quite lucky because there was already a sort of a good darts society set up, and I'd recommend it to anyone who's at university and sort of looking for sort of an activity or something to do, because you sort of meet people who have got a similar interest to you, and it's just a bit of fun. Most of the games we played were sort of just best of threes, nothing too serious. Then you have sort of competitions. I think our most famous one at Sheffield is called the Ham Cup, where the winner gets a ham just before Christmas. And what's brutal about that is the first round always is best of one. So you have people travelling up, sort of alumni from London and all over, and they might get one leg. So it's good fun. It's not taken too seriously, and yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Did you ever win the ham out of interest?
I'm a proud 3-time and reigning Ham Cup champion. Yeah, I don't think anyone's ever won it 3 times apart from me. That's probably my proudest achievement in darts, to be honest.
But forget the tour card. Forget the tour card. That's what it's like. I love to hear that. Fantastic. And what did you study, Adam?
Journalism was my undergraduate, and then I did a teaching qualification afterwards. So I'm a qualified teacher, geography. So I was doing that in schools before lockdown. Sort of only stopped doing that sort of around 18 months ago, I think.
Great. So I guess looking at the future, I guess it's trying to juggle all of that and look at what you can and can't do in terms of the tour, I imagine.
Yeah. So the last year or so, I've just been doing part-time jobs to sort of fit around the darts. I've treated the darts like a part-time job. So when I go to an event, I'm there to sort of try and win and earn a bit. But yeah, you're right. The balance is probably going to have to change now. I'm going to try and compete with the boys at the top. But yeah, hopefully I'll be able to do a few less shifts and spend a bit more time on the practice board. But we'll see.
Absolutely, yeah. So we've got time to think about that, definitely. We'll just touch on your UK Open debut from last year. Firstly, your experience at Riley's when you qualified. Was that a nice moment?
Yeah, I was sort of the first of many sort of scarcely believable things, to be honest. I went I was trying to sort of rally support amongst other people from who I played with at university, and sort of put a Facebook post on explaining it. Yeah, come along. And I think there's a line on there saying, sort of, just come along, none of us are going to win, it should be a good day out. And then obviously I went and sort of kept getting through rounds, got to think it was the quarter-final. My friend who was with me, Johnny Kirk, came up to me and said, Adam, I think I'm not joking, but I think you've got a good chance of winning this. So I shut up, go away. And then, so yeah, luckily in the end, managed to get over the line. couldn't believe it, and it was just such an exciting opportunity to go and sort of play with the pros. I remember walking into the room at Butlins in Minehead, and it's all the sort of people from the bottom 64 anyway on the Pro Tour, like names and faces I recognised from the telly and from Pro Tour streams and stuff, and then just me. I'm like, what am I doing here? But yeah, the whole thing was fantastic.
But clearly, whet your appetite to then try and get back there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the moment, because it was. I've been putting in practice like a couple of hours a day, but at that point when I won the qualifier, I've been doing it for about sort of 6-7 weeks. So when that happened, I sort of something twigged, and I thought, maybe there's something to this. Maybe I should give it like at least a couple of years and see how far I can get. So it was at that point I really started taking it seriously and going to lots of local opens. There's a really strong sort of quote unquote amateur scene around here, in South Yorkshire anyway, with sort of names who have been on the Pro Tour before. So there's plenty of competition about if you want it.
Yeah, and of course you do get 2 more goes at the UK Open at the very least on this after winning your card, so that's another bonus.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, looking forward to going back and hopefully trying to win a game this time. I think it was 6-3 I lost to Venig, but 2 of the legs were 24 darters. I think he let me have a couple. I think he felt sorry for me.
Well, we look forward to seeing you back in that sort of the cauldrons or boards 3 to 8, or even on the main boards as well. So we'll have to go on to Q School then, of course. So 6 wins at stage 1, and then so you had enough points. Now, is that a difficult decision to make? So when you've got enough points, to think, right, I'm going to take the day off now, and is that what was your thought process there?
To be honest, it wasn't a difficult decision, because you look at it and think I've got another 4 days of darts to play potentially, and the prediction was that 3 points was enough, and I had 5, I think. So if I'd had 4, I might have gone. But with 5 points, I was more than happy to have a bit of a lie-in. So early start to get to the venue for about 8 o'clock and start practicing. So yeah, I was more than happy to have that Wednesday off.
Yeah, well, clearly paid dividends. So on day 2 of stage 2, this is when you really made your move. You were runner-up. What do you remember about that day, and were there any games that you were particularly proud of?
Yeah, I remember being very lucky, I think, because I played some like fantastic players. I played Nathan Gervin, who I was watching on the telly like a few weeks before, and he didn't play his best, and I just managed to scrape over the line. He did wire a bullseye to beat me in that game. I think he was on 1-2-4, and the treble 20 flops in. I was like, oh no. But luckily he missed it. And then played Keegan Brown, who's obviously got back on the tour but just lost his card, and I think we both sort of dragged each other down in that game. But it wasn't very good, but again I managed to hit the double to win it before he did. And then sort of my luck ran out in the final, because I was 5-3 up, and in the deciding leg anyway, Graham hit a fantastic 180 when I was on 167, and I had a go at it, but it's a tough finish. And he managed to get it, but yeah, I remember saying to my friends who were there, I was sort of like sat down in between like the quarter final and the semi final and the final, going, oh, what's happening? And yeah, just kept going. Yeah,
it must be difficult to keep emotions in check, I imagine, when you're in that situation. And of course, you're going into day 3. I guess you sort of think you've got enough, but not quite sure.
Yeah, day 3 was hard, because obviously going into day 2, I had no points, and I was half. I think I'd already looked on Booking.com for hotels for Milton Keynes for this weekend for the Challenge Tour, so it wasn't too much pressure before then. But then obviously, I think going into day 3, I was top of the order of merit, and you're sort of thinking, right, what have I got to do here? And I drew sort of my friend Paul Mitchell, who's I played him in the final of the UK Open qualifier we were just talking about, and sort of just beat him. So I was like, the sort of the thing you want in that sort of situation is someone you don't know. So I saw the draw, I was like, oh, no, and I got a good start, but he took 2 ridiculous double finishes out, got 140 and a 96 on 2 double 19s or something. And I was stood there and, oh no, here we go. And again, I think he mismatched darts against me, and I managed to take it. In the round after, Lee Cox mismatched darts against me, and I took it. And that was sort of the point I wanted. And I think I won one more game after that. And then at that point, I thought I'd done it then, but not quite enough, because I thought I had to come back on the Sunday, but in hindsight, it was all right. But it's a wonderful thing, hindsight, isn't it?
Well, indeed, yeah. So it was that win against Andy Jenkins, which sealed it. Yeah, absolutely. And so obviously you go back on the Sunday, you think, I think I've done enough, but you went for it anyway, which is, it's such an unusual. I can't think of any other example in the sport where you would actually have to think about this sort of thing. So I guess that's quite unusual.
Yeah, absolutely, because you sort of go in thinking, I could actually do my chances harm here, and I think Conan White had actually sort of played himself out of the spot in the end. Obviously, he had to go, and sort of I felt like I had to go, but you're right, it's very unusual, and I'm not sure there's anything else they could do or a different way of doing it other than, I think leg difference is pretty fair. You could potentially do it on number of wins or something, because obviously there's people who turn up 4 days, win a game each day, and then don't get any points if they lose their second game. So they might come away having won half their games and not having any points. But yeah, there's numerous suggestions of how to do it, and pros and cons with all of them. So I'll just leave it to them. Really, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Many podcasts out of that.
yeah.
And so just a word for your supporters, friends, and family that have helped you, Adam, to get to this point.
There's just so many. I say the University of Sheffield sort of Darts Society. We had two members down with me there. So I had Ellis Turner, who's just started sort of in the refereeing side of things. He was actually doing marking for the first 3 days and then stayed to support for the last four. I had Luke Davis, who came down he stayed with me for the week and watched it. I think he was more nervous than me for half of it. I remember going for the double on one game in a 5-all, and he walked up down the corridor because he couldn't stay and watch it. And I was like, thanks, mate. But yeah, I don't blame him. So it was lovely to have those two there, and the rest of the society sending me messages. Too many people to name. Hannah, my girlfriend, she's been very, very supportive and just sending me messages and saying the right things. Obviously, my dad, who I've played darts with, my mum, and also sort of darts wise, a big shout out to the ADC and Steve Brown and Scott Hunt and what they've done, because it was through that route that I started playing and found events to play in, and that got me on the Super Series, the Modus Super Series, which without that money from that, I wouldn't have been able to afford to enter Q School. So sort of indirectly through them, that's why I've managed to get the tour card.
Well, congratulations again, Adam. It's great to hear from you, and all the best on the next adventure of the next 2 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks again to Adam for joining us. Now on to the big news from this week, and it is the results are in for our third annual Weekly Dartscast Awards. We're going to touch on the awards in a moment, what we made of them, and if we'd have chosen differently, but we'll just run you through a couple of them. We won't go through all 19 of the awards, but Player of the Year, Michael Smith, Josh Rock picking up the Young Player Newcomer, Raymond van Barneveld, the Legend of the Year, the tournament going to the PDC World Championship, commentator Wayne Mardle. We had the checkout of the year, the 161 from Mensa Suljovic in the World Championship, the miscount, Jamie Hughes going 7 darts into a 9-darter and hitting treble 19, second dart on a 144 to leave 27. And our guest of the year was Paul Lim, and I'll leave you to reveal the result of the tip of the year as well, because I'm as disappointed as you are that you didn't pick it up. But give us your reaction to the results. What did you think?
I think most of them they got right last week. We talked about the Player of the Year one. I think I would have voted Michael Van Gerwen, but it was very close between him and Michael Smith, and one of the people who didn't get nominated, Bo Greaves, in my opinion. And I don't think there was a wrong answer between those three. I think there was a good case to be made in any of those directions, but I was leaning Michael Van Gerwen for Player of the Year in the end. So it's one I would have voted differently, but I can't say anyone got it wrong. I think all three had phenomenal years in different ways. Manager of the Year, I thought it would be Mark Pritchard, who is Michael Smith's manager. maybe people didn't know who he was. I don't know, but I was a little surprised on that one. That's one where I think you listeners got it wrong on that one. There's one other one I think you guys got it wrong on, which I'll get to in a second. I do need to apologize because earlier in the show I read Matthew Edgar's tweet, but what I should have said is Weekly Dartscast Award winning Twitter Matthew Edgar, or tweeter, however you want to call it, because, well, he's an award winner, and that for the second year in a row. So I apologize for misintroducing his tweet earlier, not giving him the respect that he deserves as a two-time Weekly Dartscast Award winner now. And then lastly, the other one where I think you listeners got it wrong is Tip of the Year. And okay, I am biased. I do think I should have won, but that's not why I'm saying you guys got it wrong. There's a difference between a tip and a bet. And, well, the guy's deleted his account, so we don't know now whether he actually was tipping Michael Smith to win the Grand Slam and the World Championship, or if he saw what was really favorable odds for something that had a decent likelihood of happening. The latter is just taking advantage of good odds. If he had actually said, no, I think he's winning these two specific events, then yeah, Tip of the Year. He got it right. But I think it was just, maybe it's the bet of the year. It was definitely a good bet. But there is that difference. He took advantage of the odds. I said Michael Smith would win 2 majors over the course of the year. I didn't say which 2, but when there were only 3 events to go and I was sticking with him, I did say which 2. I said it would be the Grand Slam. I said he would not win the Players' Championship final, and then I said he would win the World Championship. So you know what? I made that same tip. So why didn't I get the votes? Maybe because after 7 years, you guys are rightfully sick of hearing me talk, and especially talk about myself. But I feel a little aggrieved that I didn't get that award. I don't know if I could ever forgive you guys. Okay, I already do forgive you guys. That's all in the past. Let me win it this year with my tip of Dirk van Dijvenbode winning his first major.
Very good. Yeah, I was going to say, when the results came in for that, I was gutted for you as well, because I did vote for you, Burton, to win that. And I think you had 2 nominations in there as well. I think you had also the Gabriel Clemens to beat Gerwyn Price in the World Championship. So you had 2 nominations, 2 shots at winning it. But our listeners, as every year, they have the final say, and they went with Mitch Watton on Twitter with his one. And as you point out there, it is kind of the same tip, isn't it? You've said that Michael Smith's going to win 2 majors, and he said the same, although he is a bit more specific. He did choose the 2 majors that he was going to win, and he did get $1,000 for it. So he's done pretty well there. But you did win it in 2020. Peter Wright won it in 2021. We've got a new winner this year. 3 years we've been doing these awards, and I think I had a nomination this year, which I was pleased with, but I've come nowhere near to winning it. So I need to up my game for this year and try and win it for the first time. But looking at the awards overall, I think our listeners, they did a good job. There was a few awards in there that you could argue a case for someone else winning it. And I think, like every year, some of the categories in there were very competitive. We had the checkout of the year. I put a clip up on Twitter of all the nominations, the 4 or 5 that we had in there, and it was such a hard one to call that one. But pleased to see Mensah Suljovic get that one, because that 161 was a very special one. But any other year, you're probably looking at Simon Whitlock with the 3 balls. The 150 would take a lot of beating. So yeah, that was a hard one to call. I agree with you about the manager one as well. I think if we'd have put Mark Pritchard brackets Michael Smith's manager, he'd have probably won that vote. I think Tournament of the Year, I think that was one that the World Championship has won again. But for me, I'd have probably gone with any of the other nominations. We had the World Match Play, the UK Open, the World Cup. For me, as a tournament from start to finish, they were a bit more entertaining than that for me. But yeah, just want to say as well, big thanks to all of our listeners that got involved in nominating for the awards, voting for the awards as well. We had record numbers for both parts of it, and it was just good to see so many of you guys get involved in some way. It seems to be something that's growing each year, so do appreciate the support for that. And also thanks to the winners that got back to us. I know it's a strange time of year. Some of the players are taking their holidays, taking a break from darts before the season starts up for a lot of them, but quite a few of them getting back to us with a short video to accept the award, and that's a big part of it as well for us, is seeing the winners recognise the awards, thanking the listeners for voting them to win it. And as I say, some of the winners were on holiday, so we couldn't get anything over from them, but we appreciate everyone that did send one to us. And yeah, I guess we'd better start planning for next year's awards. We had 19 awards maybe we can up it to an even 20 this year. But yeah, the main one for me is that tip of the year. Hopefully I'll be able to put something together a little bit better this year and try and win that prize this year.
Well, if we do add a 20th award, we'll have to name it the James Wade Award for double 10. But we'll have one more question. This one comes from a friend of the show, George Dobson, and it's a topical one based on us just talking about me being robbed of an award for tipping Michael Smith to win 2 majors last year. George Dobson asks, how many majors will Michael Smith win this year?
Yeah, this is a good one, and really I should pass it back to you, Burton, because you got it right last year with 2, and the other 2 people that predicted this question, myself going with 1 and Michael Smith going with 3. So do I be cheeky and copy your prediction from last year, go with 2? I'm going to stick with 1, I think, and I don't want to put my neck out too much and go with 3, because once you do get to the top, it is hard to keep that level going. There will be a target on Michael Smith's back this year. He is the world number 1. He is the world champion. He has got the 2 biggest accolades or titles, if you want, in the game right now. And it's not just going to be the players that are going to be after him now. You've also got to deal yourself, being top of there and trying to set more targets. And we've seen him cope with that pretty well so far. He's won a World Series in Bahrain a few weeks ago. I think he got to the semi-finals in Denmark, but it is a long season. But yeah, I'll go with 1 again. I think we'll see the majors shared around a bit more this year, because last year we had Gerwyn Price. Peter Wright didn't win any of the ranking majors last year, and you'd be a brave man to back the same thing happening this year. I expect to see those 2 in the business end in finals again. I expect Michael Smith to be there as well. But yeah, I'm going to go 1's my prediction, but I imagine, Burton, you're going to double down now. You went with 2 last year. Maybe it'll be 3 or 4 this year, and it'll be hard to back against you for tip of the year.
Well, I am going to go more than I did last year, but only slightly. The minimum amount more than last year possible. Last year he won 2. I'm going to say he's winning 2.5 this year. And I'll explain because I think there's one major that you can say is a half major, and that's because you have to share it with someone else, and that's the World Cup. And I think this is the year that Michael Smith captains England, most likely alongside Luke Humphries, although we'll see if someone could win the UK Open and jump him. But I think it's going to be those 2. And I think this is the year that Michael Smith wins his first World Cup. So that's going to count as half a major in my mind for this question. So that means he's going to win 2 more. What are those 2 going to be? Since apparently I have to pick the exact ones to have a chance to win this award. Well, that's the more difficult thing. The 2.5, I see that with true clairvoyance, but I'm not 100% sure on what the other 2 will be. I think the World Match Play. I just got that feeling that that's an event that he's going to be ready for. He's come close a couple times, lost that great semifinal to Gary Anderson during the pandemic year. There's been a few other times where he's done all right there, but hasn't won it yet. Obviously, hadn't won any major until the Grand Slam last year. I think that'll be one of the 2, and I think he'll win one of the non-ranking ones. Will it be the Premier League? That would be great, but I feel like Michael Van Gerwen's going to repeat in that one. I think it'll be one of the other non-ranking events at some point. I'll go for the one near the end of the year. I think he wins the World Series final. Obviously, he's off to a great start in the World Series, winning half of the ones to date. I think this will be the year that he wins the World Series final. So that'll be the non-ranking one he wins, plus the World Match Play, plus half a major for the World Cup. So I'm going 2.5 to up it on last year. Anything else for this week?
Well, a few things just to say. Thanks to our guests for joining us, to Scott Hunt. Nice to have him back on the show and hear more about the ADC, what they're doing for amateur darts. To Adam Warner, one of the new tour card holders, a listener of the show as well, it turns out. So thanks for listening, Adam. Thanks to Matthew for providing us with that interview as always. Thanks to our sponsor, Dartwolf. If you want more Dynamite Darts content, head on over to dartwolf.tv. Give Dartwolf a follow on Twitter at Dartwolf180. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to everyone who continues to support us in any way. We really appreciate it. And it's a massive weekend of darts coming up. We've got the Masters, we've got the Dutch Open, and most importantly of all, on Sunday, we've got the draw for the World Seniors Championship. We're going to find out who the GOAT, Ko Stompe, is going to play in the first round of the World Seniors Championship. And we're going to see which player he's going to beat before bringing back the crane on the Circus Tavern stage. One of 5 times he's going to be doing that week as he goes on to win the World Seniors title. And you said the World Cup's half a major. Let's call the World Seniors half a major, and he will become a fully fledged major champion. I can't wait. Lots of darts to enjoy. That's all you've got to do because it is nearly here. So when it comes around, make sure you enjoy the darts.
Yes, indeed. And what's the count now for how many tour card holders we've had of the current tour card holders that we've had on the show?
Well, we've just had Adam on the show. I think that's putting us up to 102, something in that range. So we're starting to head towards that 110 again.
Yeah, so I mean, it's still early in the year, so let's see if we can get it maybe to 120 this year. Obviously, there are some players who it's more difficult because of language barriers, but we're trying to get you all the voices that the PDC has to offer, and that'll be one of our goals for this year, especially now that we know that some of those are longtime listeners of the show. But we'll be back next week, as you mentioned, to recap the Dutch Open and to recap the Masters and to look ahead to the World Seniors, to look ahead to the Premier League. Just a couple weeks now until the first set of Players' Championship events for 2023, and we'll have at least one major champion on next week. You'll have to wait for that. You'll have to hang tight for that, and until then, just enjoy the darts because 2023 is underway.